So, good day. Before we proceed to the specific audit of accounts, let's have a review of the basic concepts of financial statement audit. So, this discussion is also applicable to the audit and specialized industries, as concept of auditing is the same pa rin kahit anong industries, kahit common. Ang mga common industries natin is yung merchandising, servicing, and manufacturing. Yung mga specialized industries naman, yung mga banks, insurance, hotels, restaurants, hospitals, schools, mining and oil, etc. Okay. At the end of this discussion, we will be able to recall the complete set of a financial statement and its objective, know the need for an independent financial statement audit, know the nature of financial statement audit and its objective, know the process in financial statement audit, and understand each major phase and how they are accomplished. Okay. The company's management prepares financial statements as follows: statement of financial position, statement of comprehensive income, statement of changes in equity, statement of cash flows, notes to financial statements. Okay. These are communicated to users. Normally 1 year for audited FS. Then meron ding mga interim audited FS para dun sa mga listed companies. Okay? As we all know, the objective of financial statements is to provide information about the reporting entity's financial position and performance that is useful to a wide range of users in making economic decisions. Diba? For financial position, yung asset, liabilities, and equity. Doon naman sa performance, yung revenues and expenses. Okay? Yung users natin are classified into two, yung external users tsaka internal users. Yung external users, sila yung mga hindi directly involved dun sa managing ng business. Yung tulad ng mga investors, lenders, government agencies, customers, suppliers, and the public. Yung internal users naman, sila yung mga directly involved dun sa managing ng business, such as yung president down to managerial employee, rank and file employees, members of the board of directors that involved in the management. Pero diba dun sa natin, conceptual framework, sabi niya yung general purpose financial statements is intended to the primary users, which are yung external users, di ba? Okay. Next is the need of an independent financial statement audit. Bakit ba nga natin kailangan? Di ba? So, una, conflict of interest between the management and the user of financial statements. Di ba? So, we have, meron silang separate interests or objectives. Example, yung management. Diba? Gusto nila yung sound financial statements in order to acquire loans from banks or other creditors. Diba? Yung external users naman, say investor for shares valuation, supplier, whether to provide goods or services on account, yung BIR, kung talaga nagbabayad sila ng correct taxes, yung SEC naman kung ina-adapt nila yung correct accounting policy, di ba? As regulatory body ng corporations and partnerships dito sa Pilipinas, yung SEC. Okay. The next is expertise. Since most of the users are not equipped with the necessary skills and competence to determine whether the FS is reliable, the auditor is hired to verify the reliability of such financial statements. The next one is remoteness of intended users. So, di ba, halos lahat ng intended users walang access dun sa entities records to verify the quality of the financial information. Okay? Then, financial consequences, di ba? misleading FS may result to substantial financial losses or consequences, diba? As a result of incorrect decision making. Kaya kailangan yung audited financial statements before making economic decisions. Okay. So necessary, diba, to avoid biases on the part of the management and present the financial information that is relevant and reliable para dun sa decision needs ng mga external users. Okay? Financial statement audit. An audit conducted to determine whether the financial statements of an entity are fairly presented in accordance with an identified financial reporting framework. Yung full PFRS, PFRS for SMEs, or PFRS for small entities. So, paano natin malalaman kung ano dapat i-adapt na framework? Okay, sabi ng SEC, under the SRC Rule number 68 as amended in 2019, sabi niya, companies shall adopt full PFRS if they are listed with public interest or secondary licenses or large entities. Diba? Yung large entities, sila yung may mga asset na more than 350 million or liabilities na more than 250 million. Okay? Classified sila as large entities and need nila mag-adapt ng full PFRS. Yung may secondary licenses naman, nabanggit ko kanina, sila yung need ng license from other government agencies other than SEC. Okay? So, example, kailangan nila magkuha ng license sa insurance commission kung insurance company sila. Sa BSP naman kung banks or financial institutions sila. Okay? So, tawag dun sa mga companies na yon with secondary licenses. Okay. PFRs for small and SMEs naman, sila yung medium-sized entities or sila yung may asset na more than 100 million to 350 million or liabilities of more than 100 million to 250 million. Okay? Need nila mag-adapt ng PFRS for SMEs. Okay? Then, small entities. Actually, ito bago lang tong PFRS for small entities. Okay? Nung 2019 lang to 2018 siya na issue and na-adapt ng SEC. Then, naging applicable siya, mandatory, nung 2019. Okay. Mas simplified yung mga, dito, yung mga asset, liability, equity, revenue, and expense recognition. Okay. So, yung small entity, sila yung may mga asset na 3 million to 100 million or liabilities na 3 million to 100 million. Then, meron din tayong micro entities. Sila yung may mga asset na or liabilities na below 3 million. So, yung mga micro entities, yung meron silang choice kung i-adapt nila yung small entities or income tax basis. Okay. Bibigyan ko na lang kayo ng copy ng SRC rule na andun din yung mga responsibility ng auditor, yung mga reports na need to comply ng isang auditor na nandun din sa SRC rule. Okay? Kasi in practice, in reality, susundin natin yan. Okay? So, sino ba si SEC, 'di ba? Si SEC, sila yung yung Securities and Exchange Commission is the government regulatory body for corporation and partnerships in the Philippines. Meaning, all corporations and partnerships are under the supervision of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Yung SEC, sila yung nag-a-adapt ng accounting standards issued by the Financial Reporting Standards Council to be the basis in the preparation and presentation of the financial statements of corporations and partnership in the Philippines. Si BIR naman, di ba? Siya yung taxing authority naman, which influence din ng choice ng accounting standards and procedures ng mga corporation and partnership. That's why in our audit reports, we have reports on supplementary information required by the BIR, which is doon nakadisclose yung mga taxable income and deductible expenses of a particular company. Ito yung tinatawag nating report on other legal and regulatory requirements sa audit report. Okay. Next is, the purpose of an audit is to enhance the degree of confidence of intended users in the financial statements. Yung intended users natin, yung tinutukoy natin is yung external users. Okay? Then, the objective of the auditor is to obtain reasonable assurance. Okay? Reasonable, not absolute, because of the inherent limitations of the audit. Okay? About whether the financial statements as a whole are free from material misstatements, whether due to fraud or error, thereby enabling the auditor to express an opinion by means of audit report on whether the financial statements are prepared in all material respects in accordance with an identified financial reporting framework. Okay? Bali, nagre-review lang tayo, tapos nyo na to sa auditing theory. So, nire-review lang natin. Kasi yung focus ng application 2 is sa financial statement audit. Then, FS audit is an independent examination of an entity's financial statements to address the following assertions. Okay. Yung existence, whether assets, liabilities, equity, revenues, expenses really exist, occurrence, whether the financial transactions that have been recorded have occurred, diba? Completeness, whether all transactions that should have been recorded have been recorded, diba? Rights and obligations, whether the entity holds or controls the rights to assets, and liabilities are the obligations of the entity. Measurement and valuation, whether financial accounts are properly measured and or valued. Presentation and disclosures naman, whether the financial accounts are presented and disclosed appropriately in the notes to financial statements. Okay? Then, the audit process. Okay? The following are the major phases in a financial statement audit. Number 1 is pre-engagement activities or yung client acceptance. Number 2 is yung audit planning and evaluation of client's internal control system. Next is evidence gathering and or audit documentation. Then reporting or issuance of audit reports. Okay? Unahin natin yung pre-engagement activities. Okay? So, ito yung procedures conducted to determine whether or not to accept a new engagement or retain an existing client. Diba? Factors to consider include the following. Diba? For new engagement, prospect client's integrity and business practice. Okay? Then, auditor's competence, independence, and resources. Diba? As professional accountant, we should not be associated with clients whose integrities are questionable. Diba? That's why we normally communicate with the prior auditor upon obtaining audit client's approval. Diba? In our case before, nung nasa firm pa ako, nagkakanda kami ng meeting. So, kinakausap namin yung management. Lalo na yung kinakausap namin yung head ng tawag doon ng finance or yung merong responsibility sa financial information, then yung president. So, nagkakanda kami ng meeting. Then, yung competence, tsaka yung resources. Capable ba tayo of doing the job? Do we have the necessary skills and experience to do the job, di ba? Hindi porket CPA tayo, kaya na nating i-audit, di ba? So, merong kasing mga companies, especially yung mga specialized industries na medyo komplikado yung revenue and expense recognition nila. Okay? So, isa yun sa mga need natin i-consider. Then, meron bang threat to independence and to compliance with fundamental principles? So, isa yun, yung kino-consider natin yan, di ba? Then, retention of existing clients. So, dito, tinitingnan natin kung merong changes sa management, directors, ownership, then yung nature ng client's business. Then, any other changes that may affect the scope of our examination. Di ba? So, whether it is a new engagement or existing engagement, the term should be documented in an engagement letter. So, in practice, ginagawa to every year. So, ginagawa namin to every year. Nagsasend kami ng engagement letter for client's approval. Audit planning and evaluation of client's internal control. It involves developing a general audit strategy and a detailed approach for the expected conduct of the audit. Normally, it requires active participation of the whole audit team, from engagement partner down to the audit staff. The auditor's main objective is to determine the scope of audit procedures to be performed. It includes the following tasks: obtain an understanding of client's business and industry and accounting policies, obtain an understanding the client's internal control, assessing materiality and audit risk, identifying audit objectives, determining the extent of reliance on client's internal controls, determining the nature, extent, and timing of substantive procedures to be performed, and designing and finalizing the audit program. So, we normally do the risk assessment procedures in this phase. That is to obtain an understanding of the entity in its environment, including its internal control, and to assess the risk of material misstatements in the financial statements. The normal procedures are inquiries on management, analytical procedures, and observation and inspection. In my previous work before, we normally prepare a planning memo. Although we have an standard audit program after we do the risk assessment procedure. Para lang ma-determine yung focus ng audit ng particular entity. Okay. Next is evidence gathering or audit documentation. Tests of controls are conducted to assess the ability of the company's internal controls to prevent or detect material misstatements. It provides evidence that indicates a misstatement is likely to occur. Okay? So, bali yung test of controls, bali the auditors are observing, validating yung normal. Example is segregation of duties, di ba? Yung custody should be separated from the authorization, recording, and execution. So, dapat magkahiwa-hiwalay yung duties na yan, di ba? So, yun yung example ng test of controls. Then, the next one is substantive procedures. So, ito yung procedures designed to substantiate the accounts balances, or to detect material misstatements in the financial statements. It provides evidence about the existence of misstatement in an account balances. So, bali yung simple yung substantive test is to obtain evidence to confirm or refute individual account balances. Okay, so, yun yung dalawang way natin to gather evidence, yung test of controls and substantive procedures. So, depende sa result ng test of controls yung gagawin nating substantive procedures. Na-discuss na ito naman na sa auditing theory na, so bali nire-review lang natin. Then, merong two types yung substantive test, yung analytical procedures and test of details, which is yung test of details, meron din dalawa, yung test of balances and test of transactions. Okay? Yung analytical procedures are normally done by comparing the prior year audited balances, yung financial accounts, with the current year trial balances provided by the audit client. Diba? Then, dun sa pag-compare, makikita natin at chine-check natin yung mga material or significant differences. Diba? Let's say yung cash, tumaas ngayong taon or bumaba ng sobra. Accounts receivable, tumaas or bumaba ng sobra. So, meron bang nakolekta or meron bang malaking sales? Bakit tumaas siya masyado? So, from that, magkakaroon na agad tayo ng idea kung saan yung focus ng audit natin. So, that is analytical procedure. Okay? Then, yung test of details naman, bali, examination of details making up the various account balances. Either test of balance or test of transactions. Yung test of balance, bali, direct examination of ending balances of an account. Okay. Example, yung cash. So if we wanted to determine to validate the correct amount of cash, ano ba yung composition niya? Let's say cash on hand and cash in bank. So sa cash on hand, pwede nating magkaroon tayo ng cash count on let's say cut-off December 31 ng current year. Then sa cash in bank naman, i-validate natin yung bank reconciliation provided by the client. So, i-check natin yung mga standing checks doon and deposits in transit kung talagang nag-i-exist. Okay? Then, yung test of balances. Then, yung test of transactions naman, examination of transactions which give rise to ending balances of the accounts. So, example dun sa audit of cash, instead na binavalidate natin yung balances, ang gagawin natin dito is ini-examine natin yung cash receipts in cash disbursement transactions. Okay? In reality, ang ginagawa namin, in practice, before ang ginagawa namin is combination of the two. Depende sa kung gaano ka complex yung transactions. Okay. Meron tayong notation na yung audit evidence must be sufficient and appropriate to support auditor's opinion on the fairness of the financial statement. So, when we say sufficient, dapat competent and material. Okay. When we say naman appropriate, should be relevant and reliable. Okay. Next is yan. Yung mga common audit procedures, ito yan, di ba? Sa pag-gather natin ng data, other types of controls or substantive procedures. So we have confirmation, observation, physical count. Usually sa mga inventories, we're doing that. Obtaining contracts and important documents, inquiries, comparisons, recalculations, test of data, vouching, tracing, footings, cross-footings, yan. Halos lahat ginagawa natin yan sa audit. So, yung vouching nga pala, di ba? So, recall lang natin yung vouching from financial statements to source documents. So, normally it addresses existence assertion. Then, yung tracing naman from source documents to financial statements. Normally it addresses completeness assertion. Then, yun. The sufficient appropriate audit evidence must be clearly documented in auditor's working papers. Yung working papers, ito yung mga records kept by the auditor that document the audit procedures applied, information obtained, and conclusions reached. Okay. In practice, always remember that working papers should stand itself. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, kapag ka merong examination ng mga government agency regarding din sa quality na pinoprovide ng isang auditor, kung bakit yun yung naging basis ng opinion niya for that particular entity, diba? So, dapat yung working papers, hindi na kailangan ng explanation ng isang auditor na naando doon siya. So, yung mismong working papers, kaya niyang i-stand yung sarili niya. Doon mismo mababasa. Okay? Yun yung isa sa pinaka dapat na quality ng isang working papers. And yung working papers are properties of auditor. Okay? Audit working papers are normally classified into two. Yung una is yung current files, pangalawa is yung permanent files. So ano ba yung current files? So ito yung documentations of audit of a particular year. Okay? So nakalagay dito yung copies ng financial statements being audited, yung audit program, working trial balance, lead schedules, detailed schedules, correspondence with other parties such as legal counsel, customers, or suppliers, banks, management, and other parties. So ito yung mga letters, yung mga confirmation. So classified as correspondence. Then nilalagay siya sa current files. So ano naman yung nasa permanent files? Yung permanent files, ito yung nakalagay yung mga information of continuing significance to the auditor normally in performing recurring audits. Okay? Simply documentations of unchanging data, o yung mga hindi halos nagbabago, or yung pang long term. Okay? Example is yung mga articles of incorporation and bylaws, transfer certificate of title of real properties, long-term contracts and agreements, organizational chart, clients accounting internal control, accounting internal control policies, investment certificates, kung meron siyang mga investments, then ownership and equity structures. Okay? So, bale, yung current files include audit documentation of audit of specific financial accounts. Okay? Micro, specific for the audit of the financial statements. Okay? Or for that particular year. While yung permanent files include audit documentation of audit clients company information as a whole. Macro, no? Doon natin ilalagay yung company information. Okay? Then, after obtaining evidence, so ano na yung next? Submission of audit reports na ba? Yes, sir. Kasi may evidence na. Siyempre hindi, di ba? The answer is no. Yung result ng audit natin, it should be communicated first with those charged with governance. Kaya mayroon tayong tinatawag na management letter. So, yung mga audit findings natin, kung mayroong mga irregularities or weakness sa internal controls, as a result of na nakita natin as a result of our audit, kino-communicate natin yan dun sa persons na charge sa governance by means of management letter. Okay? So, bali hindi mo na tayo mag-issue ng report, di ba? Mangyayari in our case before, in practice, ang ginagawa namin, nagkakanda kami ng meetings with the board, including yung management, yung higher management, let's say yung president, no? Or then yung head ng finance, including yung accountant. Yun yung mga nagiging audience namin during discussion with the management para dun sa mga audit findings. Okay? So, dyan sa discussion na yan, doon na tayo nagpo-propose ng mga adjusting entries. Okay? Then, ano tawag doon? Adjusting entries and appropriate disclosures to be made in the financial statements. Then, madalas nag-agree naman yung mga audit clients sa mga proposed adjustments. then that's the time na mag-issue na tayo ng audit reports. Okay? Okay, nabanggit ko kanina dun sa charge of governance. So, bali, sa mga malalaking sa mga malalaking company, meron silang, lalo na yung mga listed companies, meron silang audit committee. So, madalas doon natin sinasubmit yung reports natin. Pero dun sa mga closely tawag doon sa mga family corporation or yung mga corporation na hindi listed yung shares nila. So, minsan yung management, yung board, yung stockholder, sila na din yung member ng board of directors, then sila na din yung mga officers ng company. Kung usually, yung karamihan ng nagiging client namin before is family corporation. Talagang, o yung tinatawag nating closely held corporation, talagang sila-sila lang. Mag-asawa, tapos yung mga anak nila, then yung mga other friends. Okay? So, yun. Meron munang discussion before issuance ng audit reports. Diba? Hindi tayo pwedeng hindi tayo basta pwedeng mag-issue agad. Diba? Kailangan natin siya i-communicate with those charged with governance. Okay. Yung governance is yung the one that oversee the management. Next is reporting and issuance of audit reports. Okay. So, based on the results of auditor's evaluation, the auditor may issue any of the following reports. Unmodified opinion or clean opinion, then modified opinion. Okay. So, unahin natin yung clean opinion. Ito yung madalas na ini-issue in practice. Sa unmodified opinion, the auditor concludes that the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respect in accordance with the applicable financial reporting framework. Okay? Then, yung modified opinion naman, the auditor concludes that based on the audit evidence obtained, remember, based on the audit evidence obtained, the financial statements as a whole are not free from material misstatements, or the auditor is unable to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence to conclude that the financial statements as a whole are free from material misstatements. Okay? So, ano-ano ba yung mga modified opinion? Meron tayong qualified opinion, adverse opinion, and disclaimer of opinion, or yung walang opinion. Okay? Then, the following are the modifications. So, unahin natin yung qualified opinion. Yung pwede tayo mag-issue ng qualified opinion, meron dalawang factors, either due to misstatements or due to scope limitation. So, kapag as a result of misstatements, so bali, dapat meron tayong audit evidence, okay? Na yung misstatements, individual or in aggregate, are material but not pervasive to the financial statements. Okay, so mamaya i-discuss natin when to classify paano natin masasabing material and pervasive. Then kapag as a result naman ng scope limitation, yung auditor is unable to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence, but the auditor concludes that the possible effects of undetected misstatements, if any, could be material but not pervasive to the financial statements. Okay? So, ano ba yung mga misstatements? So, yung misstatements include inappropriate accounting policies selected, misapplication of selected accounting policy, inappropriate or inadequate disclosure sa financial statements. So, yung mga misstatement. Okay? Yung scope limitations naman, maybe limitations imposed by the management Example, management prevented the auditor from requesting external confirmation. So, limitations yan imposed by the management. Or circumstances beyond the control of the client. Example, yung accounting records ng management ng client na anong tawag doon? Have been destroyed by fire, typhoon, etc. So, beyond the control of the entity yon. Then, yung meron namang circumstances relating to nature or timing of auditor's work. Example is yung late appointment which enable the auditor to observe physical count. Okay? So, yun yung mga circumstances ng scope limitations. Okay. When is a misstatement material but not pervasive? Okay. So, it is material if it could affect the decisions of the readers or intended users of financial statements. Okay. However, it is not pervasive if such misstatement, even if material, is not enough to overshadow the fair presentation of the financial statements taken as a whole. That is, it won't render the financial statements as a whole materially misstated. So, according to PSA 320, yung materiality is a matter of professional judgment. However, under the SRC Rule number 68 of the Securities and Exchange Commission, sabi niya, yung meron siyang quantitative test of materiality ng mga accounts. No? Una is yung for deficiency or inconsistency. Sabi niya, material daw if the information involves the transactions, amount, or account that represents 10% or more or 5% or more. Yung 10% or more para dun sa mga non-listed, yung 5% or more para dun sa mga listed. No? Represents 10% or more or 5% or more of the total of related accounts of transactions. Okay? Then, sa misstatements naman, sabi niya, material siya kapag ganun pa rin, kapag yung misstatements, kahit whether due to fraud or error, kapag it represents 10% or more for non-listed or 5% or more for listed companies of the total of related accounts or transactions. Bibigyan ko kayo ng SRC rule. I-upload ko dun sa LMS. Okay? Para meron kayong idea. Okay? So, yun yung sinusunod ng mga auditors, no, in practice, in reality dito sa Pilipinas. Then yung pervasiveness naman, sabi niya sa pervasiveness, yung misstatement is pervasive if it could affect the financial statements as a whole. Okay? So bigay tayo ng example, okay? So example, yung misstatement ng let's say cash in bank. Okay? So let's say yung recognition ng cash na post-dated check. So na-receive sa customers. Bale, yung ni-record agad siya as cash kahit post-dated siya. So assume lang natin. So bali yung cash is overstated and the accounts receivable is understated. Okay? So, let's say the amount involved a big amount and assume also that it affects more than 5%. And our audit clients is listed companies. So, it affects more than 5% of the total cash and cash equivalents. So, ito yung sinasabi nating related account. Kung sa yung classification natin sa statement of financial position is cash and cash equivalents. So, tapos may understatement dun sa cash in bank. So, kapag kayong misstatement dun sa cash in bank is more than 10% for, kung sakali, non-listed corporation, kung more than 10% yung misstate, o kung 10% or more yung misstatement against dun sa total cash and cash equivalent, so material yon for purposes of Securities and Exchange Commission. Okay? Then kapag meron namang, let's say, sa trade and other receivable, so let's say included dun sa trade and other receivables mo yung advances to supplier account, then merong may misstatement na involved na amount na more than say 10% ng total trade and other receivable, so misstatement yun, material yun for purposes of Securities and Exchange Commission. Okay? So, doon na tayo sa example. Ano nga ba example? Yung recording ng post-dated check. So, we can say that the transactions involved are material kasi it could affect the decision of the reader. Example, the board of directors might issue cash dividends believing that they have available cash for immediate distribution to stockholders. So, isa yun sa mga possible na maging decisions. Then, when in fact, the said amount is not yet ready for immediate use, di ba? So, for purposes of decisions ng users, material siya. However, the said misstatement is not pervasive. In the sense na only the statement of financial position is affected under the current asset section, di ba? And not the whole financial statements. No? So, hindi affected yung comprehensive income and equity. Okay, so yung example ng material but not pervasive. Okay. Then, adverse opinion. So, meron na tayong qualified. So, next is adverse opinion. So, adverse, this opinion is issued when the auditor concludes after obtaining sufficient appropriate audit evidence, after obtaining sufficient appropriate audit evidence that misstatements individually or in aggregate are material and pervasive to the financial statements. Okay? So, remember, you should have an evidence that the financial statements as a whole are misleading. So, yun yun sa adverse. Then, pwede ka lang mag-issue ng adverse kung meron kang evidence. Okay? And such misstatements should be material and pervasive. Okay? So, mamaya, magbibigay tayo ng example ng material and pervasive misstatements. Okay, next is disclaimer of opinion. Okay, so the auditor shall disclaim an opinion when the auditor, due to scope limitation, so, di ba, meron na tayong example kanina ng scope limitations, either imposed by management or circumstances beyond the control of the management and the auditor. So, yung auditor pwedeng mag-disclaim ng opinion kapag due to scope limitation is unable siya to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence, but the auditor concludes that the possible effect of undetected misstatements, if any, could be material and pervasive to the financial statements as a whole. Okay? So, when is a misstatement material and pervasive? Yun, sinabi na natin kanina, material siya kapag it could affect the decisions of the readers or intended users of the financial statements. Then, it is pervasive if the effect of such misstatements is highly material and enough to overshadow the fair presentation of the financial statements taken as a whole. That is, several items in the financial statements are affected, as to render the overall financial statements materially misleading. Okay? So, example of material and pervasive. Say, misstatement and inventory. So, we all know that inventories affects cost of sales. So, kapag affected yung cost of sales, affected yung net income. Kapag affected yung net income, affected yung income tax expense. So, affected yung asset, liability, because of the income tax payable or accounts payable dun sa inventories. Then, yung equity. So, affected yung statement of financial position, yung statement of comprehensive income, pati statement of changes in equity. So, affected silang lahat. So, it could be considered as pervasive. Okay? So, another is inappropriate accounting framework adopted by entity. Let's say, yung company should adopt full PFRS instead of PFRS for PFRs for small SMEs, or PFRs dapat nag-adapt siya ng PFRs for SMEs instead ng small entities. So, departure yun from PFRS. So, automatic yung misstatement material dahil departure siya from from standards. So, it could result to inappropriate revenue and expense recognitions and asset and liability recognition. Kaya possible na madalas pervasive siya, okay? Dahil magkaibang reporting standards 'yan. So, magkaibang standards, magkaibang recognition. So, it would affect the whole financial statements. In my experience of more than 5 years in accounting firm, isa pa lang siguro yung natandaan ko na nag-issue kami ng modified opinion. Qualified opinion lang yun. Kasi mostly plain opinion. Kasi sumusunod sa atin yung clients natin. Diba? Yung syempre nakakahiya naman makita ng government agency or ng mga stockholders na yung financial statements nila is yung in-issue ng auditor nila is adverse or modified. So, kaya sumusunod yung mga clients natin. In any case, yung issuance ng modified audit reports should be communicated first with those charged with governance. Okay, audit matters are those matters that in auditor's judgment were most of significance in the audit of the financial statements of the current period. Okay. So, ito yung mga sa tingin ng auditor napaka-importante sa mga financial accounts ng audit client. These matters were addressed in the context of the audit of the financial statements as a whole and informing the auditor's opinion thereon. And the auditor does not provide a separate opinion on this matter. So, kahit na significant siya, hindi tayo nagpo-provide ng separate opinion sa kanya. So, yung opinion pa rin natin dun sa financial statements as a whole, although mayroon siyang special mention sa auditor's report natin. These are required only for audits of listed companies. Actually, yung kay Audit Matters, bago lang to nung 2016 ata or 2017 lang to. So, sa mga non-listed, hindi sa audit ng non-listed companies, hindi kailangan maglagay ng kay Audit Matters. Okay? So, yung kay Audit Matters are described in the auditor's report as separate paragraph which include a reference to the related disclosures, if any, in the financial statement, why the matter was considered to be one of most significance in the audit and therefore determined to be a key audit matter, and how this matter was addressed in the audit. So, example, let's say yung revenues ng mga construction companies, diba? We all know that the construction companies recognize revenue based on percentage of completion. This can be considered as key audit matter because of the judgment or estimate involved in the recognition of revenues. Okay, and how these are addressed in the audit, we can state the auditor's procedure that in validating or verifying the said revenues. Okay, then Again, yung key audit matters, including yung mga significant audit findings, are communicated with those charged with governance. Okay. Next is, okay. In some instances, the auditor may add additional paragraph on auditor's report. Ano ba yun? Emphasis of matter paragraph and other matter paragraph. So, yung emphasis of matter paragraph, sinasama natin to draw readers' attention to a matter presented or disclosed in the financial statements. Examples are, yan, significant uncertainty, early application of accounting standards, major catastrophe, na mayroong effects sa financial position, subsequent discovery of facts, affecting the previously issued opinion, then financial statements prepared using a special purpose framework. Then, yung other matter paragraph naman, ini-include natin siya to communicate a matter that is not presented or disclosed in the financial statement, but in auditor's judgment, is relevant to users' understanding of the audit, the auditor's responsibilities, or auditor's report. Example is yung reporting and comparative information. Let's say yung prior period FS hindi audited or audited ng other auditor, then yung kapag yung FS prepared using more than one frameworks, then limiting the use of auditor's report. So in my experience, I handled clients before na which we were able to issue opinions with the emphasis and other matter paragraphs. Okay, so ito yung mga reference and sources natin. Yan. Then that's the end of our discussion. Our next topic will focus on working trial balance and the usual year-end adjustments in the financial statements, yung results ng the deferrals and accruals. Suggested reading material siguro is yung basic adjusting entries dun sa deferrals and accruals. So, madali lang Then, after natin nun, doon na tayo sa correction of error, then cash, sunod-sunod na. Okay? So, okay. Thank you, class. Yan. Bye-bye.